Ah yes, England, a place known for colonization. But what if I told you that the history of England, and as a whole the British Isles as we know it, started with England being colonized? Well, this is known as the Norman Conquest, an event where England was invaded by Normandy, which Frenchified, is that a word? No, the English language, and gave them a third of their words. Yep, that's right, you're secretly speaking French if you speak English. Anyway, why? Well, we start in the good old 11th century. In 1042, Edward the Confessor of the House of Wessex was crowned the King of England. His reign was okay, nothing too serious. He was a pretty good... Oh shoot, he died. With 3 people claiming to be his heir. And so... Succession crisis! There were 3 people claiming the throne: Harold Godwinson, Harold Hardrada, and William of Normandy. Of these 3, Harold Godwinson was the only one with power in England itself, so he was able to convince the English nobles that Edward the Confessor chose him. Harold Hardrada's reasoning was based on a very weak claim that Edward maybe said he could succeed him, so he had no shot of convincing the English nobles to crown him. Finally, William of Normandy's claims were based on Edward the Confessor's mother, Emma of Normandy, so the two were distantly related. And also, he was apparently Edward's heir, but when 3 people all say that, it doesn't really mean anything. Despite the fact that Harold Godwinson had already been crowned, both Harold Hardrada and William prepared to invade England and give themselves the throne. William of Normandy had his fleet prepared by late August 1066, but unfavorable weather forced him to stay in Normandy. However, Hardrada was ready to invade by early September. A Norwegian force of 300 ships landed in North England and began an advance on York. On the 20th of September, Harold, now the King of England's forces were defeated by Hardrada. But 5 days later, the English had caught the Norwegians by surprise near Stamford Bridge. According to sources from the time, the English were ready to cross the bridge, but a lone Norwegian apparently armed with only a battle axe mowed down over 40 Englishmen somehow, until he was finally stabbed from underneath the bridge. Despite this, the Norwegians still lost the battle and were forced to leave England. Additionally, Harold Hardrada was killed. Back in Normandy, William finally managed to set sail for England, with their only reports from the time saying he had an over-exaggerated up to 150,000 men. The real number is unknown, but likely around 10,000 soldiers total, with a few hundred ships. On September 28th, William landed at Pevensey and built a small wooden castle at Hastings. Upon learning that the Normans had landed, Harold now had to turn all the way around and go back to the southern regions of England, which gave the Normans about 2 weeks to prepare for battle. On October 13th, Harold arrived, and he set up camp in Battle. Like the city. There's a city called Battle. That's where the battle happened. In Battle. I don't know why they called the city Battle. Anyway, weird British town names aside, finally, the moment you've all been waiting for, the Battle of Hastings! The battle started around 9 a.m. on October 14th, 1066, on Caldeck Hill. Harold attempted to take a defensive position, hoping to exhaust Norman forces until they were forced to retreat. When the battle began, England formed a shield wall, blocking initial attacks by Norman archers. This forced William to attack with infantry, who were also unable to break through. Even the cavalry forces couldn't break in, so a brief retreat ensued. And to top it all off, rumors started that William was dead, which didn't help the Norman forces' confusion. The confusion allowed English forces to make a charge, but William himself rode through to lead a counterattack, which boosted Norman morale when they realized William of Normandy was still alive. The afternoon was filled with assaults from both sides, but the battle raged on with high casualties. Late in the battle, King Harold of England died, with the popular theory being that he was shot in the eye by an arrow. With their king dead, the English forces collapsed, and many fled. By dusk on October 14th, the Norman forces had won. But the Norman conquest wasn't over. William of Normandy still had to get coronated and become William of England, and to do so, he would have to conquer London. He had hoped that the remaining English leaders would submit, but instead they coronated Edgar Atheling? Thank God they got rid of that weird A thing. At first, William attempted to directly storm London, but he was stopped near the London Bridge, and he was forced to retreat when he was ambushed at the Battle of Southwark. But instead of giving up, he had the bright idea. Hey, why don't we just go the other way? He went all the way around, up the Thames, and to the behind of London. The remaining military of England wasn't effective at stopping the Normans, and the remainder of Edgar's supporters surrendered to William at Berkhamsted. The English were finally defeated in early December. On December 25th, aka Christmas Day 1066, William of Normandy was crowned King of England. The rest of England had technically fallen, but William faced harsh resistance from the non-Norman native Anglo-Saxons. In the years following William now the Conqueror's coronation, he defeated the English resistance which was standing strong in Cornwall, Kent, and Northumbria. The Cornwallish resistance surrendered in spring 1068 after the siege of Exeter, and Kent was repelled after an unsuccessful siege of Dover. Northern England had the harshest resistance, and they were partially backed by Scandinavian forces. However, after about 3 years in 1070, William ravaged their lands, massacred the civilians, and killed livestock. Reportedly, 150,000 people died. But finally, the Norman Conquest ended. Can you stop it with the ta-da things? As a result, the new Norman government brought French words to the English language. In fact, an estimated 1/3 of English is stolen from French. Additionally, England also got continental possessions, which led to almost 800 years of Anglo-French wars, including the 100 Years' War. Norman rule over England continued until 1135, when Henry I left no Norman heirs to the throne. Yep, that's right, another succession crisis. Overall, the Norman Conquest was a very important piece of English history, and without it, the world would be very different. Anyway, that is going to be all for today's video. Help me hit 500 subscribers. I have some new long-form videos coming, so stay tuned. Thanks for watching, subscribe.